Hello everybody, I'm Greg, and this video is going to cover part 2 of my class on the thrift savings plan made simple. The first class, what we covered, is one of the 3 major decisions you're going to have to make when you kind of manage your, so 3 larger decisions when you manage your 401k plan, which is the thrift savings plan. Okay, so the first class in the first video we talked about dollars. How much money can you put in to your TSP, how much will be matched, and how that works, how will you make the changes, on what website, so on and so forth. So in this video, part 2, I want to talk about the second major decision that I believe you need to think about and make to better manage your thrift savings plan so your 401k is abundant for you in retirement. Now that second decision comes down to taxes. The money you put in, how do you want it to be taxed? Do you want it to be taxed now? Do you want it to be taxed when it's withdrawn? And I want to talk about a few considerations for you to think about when you're making that decision. Okay, so let me jump in there. So when I teach this class live, I usually start off with this image right over here, and I ask the class, how many buckets do you see on the screen? Right here. And I get a variety of answers, right? Some people say, oh, I see 1 bucket, I see 2 buckets. The correct answer is, what you see on the screen is 1 bucket with 2 sides. And I use this bucket to represent our thrift savings plan, or any, realistically, any 401k plan, okay? This bucket is our TSP plan, our thrift savings plan. And the reason why I like that is because within this bucket, there's 2 sides to the TSP. There's money you put in the traditional side, and there's money you can put in the Roth side. And that's what I primarily want to talk about today. How those how the money that goes into each side of that bucket is treated differently. How one is not better than the other. They're just treated differently, and they're made that way so you can decide what is best for your situation now and what you believe your situation will be in retirement when you're withdrawing this money. Okay, so please keep that in mind, and I'm going to keep referring to one side or both sides of the bucket, and that's what I mean. I want you to think about that when it comes to taxes. Okay, another thing I want you to pay attention to is down here on my screen, you'll see this line that starts off with the color black, turns into dark gray, light gray, and winds up being white. That's another thing that I hope you keep in mind. When you're deciding how much money goes into each side of those buckets, that the decision doesn't have to be all black or all white, meaning all traditional or Roth. You can do that, but for most part, most of you who's watching this video, to meet your situation, your decision is probably going to be either some lighter or darker shades of gray. So you might split the money going into those sides of the bucket by 20-80, 60-40, 70-30, maybe even 50-50. So it depends on your situation, okay? Or maybe, you might change your mind halfway through your career, or maybe after watching this class that maybe you've been doing it one way, and maybe you want to make some slight changes, and I'll talk more about that later. What are some of the ways you can make changes moving forward, okay? So to keep things simple, I mentioned terminology, and I want to make sure that the most people understand what we have doing here. So I'm going to try to keep things very simple, okay? So we have the Roth and we have the traditional sides, okay? So when you put money into the Roth side of the bucket, to make it very simple, Roth means to be taxed now. Pay taxes today. Pay taxes before we make the contribution into that side of the bucket, and we'll never have to pay those income taxes again. All right? When we make contributions to the traditional side of the bucket, it's the opposite. We will pay the income taxes on that money when the money is withdrawn. Okay? So I say withdrawn, and I don't say in retirement, because some of you, yes, you'll pull this money in retirement. Some of you will not. Some of you might pull some of you might not pull anything at all. Some of you are going to actually gift this money to your heirs, maybe a child or grandchildren and all that. And that's the reason why I say that if you gift it to those people, they will pay the income taxes based on their income tax bracket when they decide to pull the money out. Okay? And there is one way where you can give this money to somebody in retirement and not pay any taxes at all. And that's probably one of the last things I'll talk about with giving it to charities and so on. But that's to keep things simple. Just remember that way. Roth, pay taxes now. Traditional, pay taxes later when the money is actually withdrawn from the account. Okay? So what I like to do is I want to go down this list. There's some aspects that equally impact both. It can go either way. Some of them are situations why the Roth might be an advantage for you, or some situations the traditional might be an advantage of you, depending on your situation. I'm going to try to cover that. But some of the examples I'm going to give are right down the middle. We just never know. And the first one I want to start with is usually the biggest one. It has the most weight or most gravity when we're making decisions. And that's this right here. What will be our income tax bracket today, right? If we pay taxes today, versus when you plan to withdraw the money. And who knows, what's that situation going to look like? Now, let me give you some of examples to take in consideration, right? Some folks who are younger or earlier on their career, their income may not be as much now as when it is when they're closer to retirement. Why? Maybe we're straight out of school. Maybe this is our first job. We're still trying to climb that career ladder. So right now, if we pay taxes, we might be in a lower tax bracket now than when we retire after all those promotions we've gotten, all those advancements, right? When we retire or are on our way out the door, we might be in a higher tax bracket because we fought all our way throughout for these promotions, and we have a higher tax bracket in retirement, okay? So that might be one of those reasons. Now, some of you might say, well, Greg, I do plan to grow in my career and my tax bracket will naturally go up, right? But when I quit working and I retire, boom, my income should drop dramatically because I'm no longer working a job. And even though I am collecting a pension and Social Security, right, my tax bracket should be lower. And that would be a person who might have the advantage later on, right? That's one of the things that you might consider, okay? Another thing you might want to consider, and this ties into a kind of like your long-term outlook of what's going on, is, the money you pay, the taxes you pay on the money in your TSP, let me be clear, are income taxes. So even though you invest the money in either one of these sides of the bucket, if they grow and you pull the money out, you're not going to pay capital gains tax. That's a different types of tax for investments that grow. Because this is in a retirement account and the money that's going in was from your salary, the type of tax that you're going to pay is income tax, ordinary income taxes. Okay, it's a little bit different, and the reason why that is, and I'm not going to give an entire class on the progressive tax bracket, which is what we have. So the more money you make, the higher it's taxed as it goes up. But you want to keep that in mind, okay? So I'll give you an example. Here's a slide of marginal tax rates for income over time, okay? So it starts back in 1910, and my calendar ends in 2018. But this is after, in 2017, 2018 is when our most recent tax law passed to kind of change those tax brackets. The blue line up top would be the progressive, the highest tax bracket for the highest earners, and the green would be the lowest marginal tax rate. So the either the lowest earners or the money you owe the lowest level. And as you can see, they have gone up and they've gone down with time. And the reason why I'm showing you this chart is it's something that you have to consider. Where you are today versus where you will be, where will our country be the day you decide to pull this money out? You got to ask yourself, do I believe income taxes at that time will be higher or lower? Right? Because it just really depends. So for example, let's say I'm earning a good salary right now, I'm in a 32% tax bracket, right? Well, if my salary drops to a point where, let's say it drops down to $60,000 a year or $80,000 a year, and I would drop down to a 24% tax bracket. Well, that's based on today's law. If I look at myself in retirement, even though I'm making less money, if the people in power, whether it be in the Congress or in the White House, decide to increase income taxes, even though I'm making a lower amount of money every year, I might be paying the same tax rate if they raise it. So again, that's what goes back to really what you believe and what do you think the future of the country should look like. Now, I mentioned a few factors, right? So I mentioned in the future, the people who write the laws and approve the laws are the folks that are in the House of Representatives and the Senate, right, in our legislature, finally signed off, right, and turned into law by a signature of the president. Well, we don't know who those people are going to be in our retirement years or in the years that we decide to pull this money out. But it's one thing to consider. Another thing is the national debt. Our national debt is constantly growing higher. Well, to pay for that national debt, the single biggest thing that's going to help reduce that debt is to increase taxes, right? Another thing I want to mention to you is right now when I'm shooting this video in December of 2022. One of the things that we have real bad right now is what's called the wealth gap, right? Wealth inequality between the earned dollars between the highest earners in the country versus the lowest. That gap is huge right now relative to other years. And you know, if you study economics, the cycles of markets and cycles of economy, you know that those things work in cycles. And to reduce that gap, there's only one significant thing that can happen to reduce that gap, and that's to tax people who make the most amount of money more to close that gap. Okay, so those are some of the things to consider about whether you should pay the taxes now or taxes later based on what's going on in the world. And that's why, if I can go back to that slide, it's another thing to take in consideration, right? Now, the next one down is state income taxes. I do not know where you live right now. I am shooting this video and I live in the state of Nevada, a state that does not charge state income taxes. Very similar to you folks that live in Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and so on, right? But let's talk about that for a second. State income taxes. You will pay the state income taxes appropriate to the state you are living on depending on whether you try to do Roth or traditional. So I'll give you an example, right? I live and work in the state of Nevada. So let's say I'm working and earning money now, and I'm dumping money into my TSP buckets, right? If I decide to dump it into the Roth side of the bucket, meaning paying taxes now, I will pay federal income taxes, because we all do, right? But because I live in Nevada right now and I'm paying taxes, I will not pay state income taxes because I live in Nevada, okay? But let's say one day I retire, and a very common thing that retirees do, they move to places that are warmer or they move closer to their grandkids. So let's say my grandkids wind up living in San Francisco, New Jersey, Connecticut, in one of those states that does charge state income taxes, okay? And now in retirement, I want to pull some of my money out, okay? So because I live in those states and now I want to start pulling money out, if my money is in the Roth side of the bucket and I already paid income taxes on it, when I pull the money out, it doesn't matter if I live in a state that charges state taxes. I will not pay those state income taxes. And I will not pay federal income taxes again, because in the Roth side of the bucket, I've already paid that. I paid those taxes when I put the money in the bucket. Okay? So let's say it's opposite. Let's say I live and work in the state of Nevada and I contribute, and I dump a ton of money into my TSP, but this time I dump it in the traditional side of the bucket. Okay? In the same situation, right now in the state of Nevada, if I dump my money in the traditional side of the bucket, I'll get a nice tax deduction, right? Because I'm not paying the income taxes on it. But again, if I move closer to my grandchildren, or let's say I move to a state in retirement that does charge state taxes, right? Let's use San Francisco or anywhere in California for an example. If I move there, even though I worked in Nevada during my working years, even though I contributed to my 401k while I was living in Nevada, that doesn't matter. If I'm withdrawing the money in retirement and I live in California or one of the other states that charge state taxes, when I start pulling the money out of my traditional side of the bucket, I will pay federal income taxes because I haven't paid them yet. And on top of that, because I'm a resident of that state, I will pay their state income taxes. Again, so one of those things to consider, all All right. Now, let's look at the other side of that. Okay, kind of a little bit different situation, right? If I'm working in a state right now, let's say I live in North Carolina, a state that, yes, you have to pay federal income taxes, but you also have to pay state income taxes. If I put my money in the Roth side of the bucket, I am gonna pay, because I want to tax now, right? Roth side of the bucket. I will pay federal income taxes on that money and state income taxes on that money. Why? Because I am working and living in the state of North Carolina, a state that charges state income taxes, right? But let's say when I retire, I move out of North Carolina. I move to Texas. Texas is a state that does not charge state income taxes, right? So if I put my money in the Roth, right, and I dumped a ton of money in the Roth, now I live in Texas in retirement. Now I want to start pulling some of this money out. Hey, I want to go put a new roof on my house. Let's say my spouse needs a new vehicle. I want to pull it out. I can pull the money out of the Roth tax-free, right? The money that I put in was already taxed, but the growth of that money, I don't pay any income taxes. Why? Because it's Roth. Now, even though I live in the state of Texas and I wouldn't have to pay state income taxes, the expression, the ship has sailed already. When I put the money in, because I was in North Carolina, I paid both state and federal income taxes. So even though in retirement I live in Texas, that wouldn't have charged me state income taxes, I paid the taxes already, right? But in the opposite side of that story, if I lived in, hey Monty, if I lived in North Carolina and I earned money and I dumped it into my thrift savings plan, if I dumped it in the traditional side of the bucket, I would not pay any income tax, federal income taxes now. I won't pay any state income taxes now either. Why? Because it's a pay taxes later side of the bucket. So even though I live in that state, but again, I moved from North Carolina to Texas in retirement, right? In Texas, if I start taking that money out, I will still pay federal income taxes. You pay that no matter where you live. But because I live in Texas, I'm now trying to take that money out. I won't pay the state income taxes. So again, guys, the situation changed, and I probably have your head spinning by now, but it's one of those things to keep in mind. Again, I get some of us are big planners and we're very good about sticking to our plans. But quite frankly, I mean, let's be honest, if you look around, we're going to wind up where we wind up one day. And it's very hard to predict that because life happens. So keep that in mind. But it's one of those things I wanted to talk about. State income taxes does play a role depending where you live now or later. Now, let's go back to side-by-side comparison. Some of the other advantages to Roth is one of the things I've researched is you prevent a tax liability called, it's an industry term, it's called the tax torpedo. And what that means is, let's say you're married and you and your spouse, you contribute to the Roth, right? Heavily, right? Well, one day when you grow old and gray together, right? You're up there and you're ready to pull this money out, okay? Well, what happens is in the Roth, when you pull that Roth money out in retirement, you're not going to pay any taxes on that money, which is good, okay? Because if you put it in the traditional side, right, in retirement, you would owe taxes. But this is what the torpedo is about. It's hidden. What happens when one of you passes? Okay? When one of you passes, the other person, depending on your situation, let's say me and my wife, right? For example, let's say I pass before my wife. My wife, as a woman standing on her own 2 feet, has her own pension, has her own Social Security benefit, has her own IRAs and 401ks and her own investment income. Great, good for her. But when I pass, she is not going to get all the benefits I had added to her. She'll get a fraction of that, right? So she'll get a fraction of my pension. She'll get not fraction of my Social Security, she'll get the higher of hers or half of mine. But more than likely, a large percent of my income is going to be stacked on top of her current income, which some of you might think that's a good problem to have, right? She has 1.5 times of her previous income once I pass away. But so the dollars are good. But what hurts and what the torpedo is about is now what she no longer has is the tax advantages of a married couple filing jointly. Now she's a single woman the year after I die, and she'll have to file taxes as a single woman with an enormous amount of income coming in every year, and what that's gonna do to her if the income has not been taxed yet. Because pensions are taxed, Social Security is taxed, traditional 401k money, traditional IRA money is taxed, right? What happens now, it boosts her into a higher tax bracket. Now, although she has a lot more money, she is in a way higher tax bracket than where she was before when we were both alive, married, filing jointly. See what I'm saying? The advantage with Roth, the Roth doesn't add to that. She will have more money in a pension and more taxable money in Social Security, yes, as a benefit from me. But if the money is Roth, it might prevent her from jumping into that next tax bracket. So that is another powerful reason why you might want to do Roth. Another thing, this is not a dollars and cents standpoint. One of the reasons why I like Roth in retirement is because look at the physical and mental health side of retirement, right? As a spouse, if I should pass before my wife, one of the few of the things that I do not want her worrying about is calculating higher level taxes now that I'm gone. Because if she's not able to budget that accordingly, now she has to pay and hire someone to do that for her. Now I want you to think about your cognitive decline, not to mention if you should take on, and unfortunately it's a reality of older age, dementia symptoms, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Now we have a situation, not only does she have to hire a professional to help her plan with her taxes, we also worry about people taking advantage of us, right? Whether it be, people were paying to help us rather than helping us. They realize that, we are vulnerable because of our mental state. So that's one of the other things that I think about is I want to try to simplify things. So that's why, guys, retirement, and I won't go into a whole spiel about it, is more than just about numbers and percentages, right? So that's one of the advantages I see at Roth. Now, let's see some of the advantages of the traditional side. If you are a person who is applying for, who's trying to qualify for some of these benefits, putting money in the traditional side might help you. And I'll go down the list. Child tax credits, right? If your taxable income during that tax year is a certain level, it might hurt your chances. And don't make a decision just based on this presentation. Look into your numbers and talk to your accountant about that. It might hurt your ability to claim child tax credits, right? Child dependent care credits, American Opportunity Tax, lifetime learning credits. These are all deductions that you can get, or tax credits that you can get on your taxes, right? Same thing with student loan interest tax deductions. If you're showing higher level taxable income every year, which is what will happen when you do Roth, it might hurt your big might hurt your ability to do these. Not to say that it will. Run the numbers, check the facts before you make that decision. Because you might be able to do Roth and it not impact this. It just really depends, okay? But those are some of the advantages if you put the money in traditional. What the traditional would do, it'll reduce what is showing as your taxable annual income, okay? Now, going back down to our next line, let's look at the Roth again, right? So if you do Roth, it forces you to do a better job of living below your means. Living below your means is a fundamental principle of accumulating wealth, right? Maintaining your wealth and good money management. Every millionaire, every billionaire will tell you that a very good discipline in living below your means is very important to do that, okay? And the way the Roth helps you do that is you pay the taxes now. If you're paying income taxes now, it's less money in your pocket now. So you're forced to live below your means, right? But then the outcome in the end is a little bit better because now you pay no taxes on the back end, okay? So it actually helps you do that. If you do on the traditional side, you get a tax deduction today, and yes, it'll actually put more money back in your pocket today, right? But let's be honest, what are you going to do with that extra money, right? Most of us are going to buy liabilities and it's just going to disappear, right? So that's another advantage of Roth. Traditional advantage is getting a tax deduction today. Some of you, based on your jobs, your income, and unfortunately your minimal deductions, you need every tax break you can get, right? I'm talking to my physicians here, my high earners, right? So putting your money in the traditional side, right? You'll put the money there and then you'll take a tax deduction based on that money, based on your income taxes on that money, come filing time for taxes. So that is helpful. So you really got to weigh the options. What's more beneficial? Okay. Going down, let's go back to the Roth side. If you were to contribute the same amount of money, I use the example when I teach my classes. Let's say I had a twin brother. My twin brother was an exact replica of me. Not only do we look the same, we have the same job, same education, same pay, same investments, same identical everything. The only thing is if I put my money in the Roth, he put his money in traditional, what will be the difference as we went along, right? The difference is if we contributed the exact same amount and we invested the money in the exact same percentage in the exact same investments, his, I call it the snowball, his snowball rolling down the hill will always be bigger than mine. Why? Because he started with the bigger snowball to begin with. I paid taxes, which shrank my snowball. He didn't pay taxes yet, so he starts off with the bigger snowball. But this is a thing, the reason why the Roth is beneficial is the people that run the TSP, which is, it's actually ran by two companies, BlackRock Financial and State Street. Those people don't work for free. So there are fees that you pay in the TSP. You may not see it on your statement, but trust me, you pay them. So this is the thing, the fees that you pay are not based on how much money was put in or how much money was taxed. The fees are extracted out of your account based on your balance. So if, even though me and my twin brother put the exact same amount of money in, right? But mine was a little bit of mine was removed because I paid taxes, and he always has a bigger snowball than me rolling down that hill of accumulation, right? If he has a bigger balance than me, they're gonna charge him more fees, right? Now, when we get to the finish line of retirement, yes, he'll still have a bigger snowball than me, but once they charge him the taxes that he hasn't paid yet, we're gonna even out. But again, the lower the balance going down, the lower the fees all along the way, right? So again, they're taking out taxes on me now, but they're taking his taxes out later, right? So this is another benefit of the traditional. In a traditional, money you put in the traditional side of your bucket, let's say again, you're one of those people who you're not gonna spend all the money or any of the money in your 401k. You're gonna gift it to one of your children or grandchildren or a combination of the two, right? The person who pulls that money out of the account will pay the taxes based on their tax bracket that year. And if your money is in traditional, meaning you haven't paid taxes yet, your beneficiary might be in a lower tax bracket than you, right? If your beneficiary is pulling that money out at 18, 19 years old, 20, or quite frankly, maybe they chose a career field that doesn't pay as much as yours did, they might be in a lower tax bracket. So if that might be the advantage, right? Paying taxes later might be advantage to them. And imagine that if you put the money in a state that charges state income taxes, but they also live in a state that doesn't charge state income taxes, that's another bonus for the traditional. So keep that in mind. Now, the last thing I'll cover in this comparison is another way that benefits you in traditional is if in retirement you make a decision that you want to contribute to a charity of your choice. Okay? If you're a person who wants to contribute regular to charity, one of the things you could do is rather than take the cash from your pension or your Social Security or your brokerage fund or your annuity, whatever, right? If you take the money from a traditional 401k, you can make, and it goes from your 401k straight to the charity. It doesn't touch your hands. You can make what is called a qualified charitable distribution. Okay? What you actually have to do is roll it from a 401k into an traditional IRA, then make the contribution. But that won't be a taxable transaction, taxable event. When it goes from your traditional IRA to the charity, it'll be called, and you can Google this, right? QCD's, qualified charitable distributions, straight from your retirement account. Again, from the TSP into a traditional IRA to a charity, you won't pay any taxes that money at all. So you didn't pay any taxes on the front end, you don't pay any taxes in the back end if it's going to a charity. So keep that in mind. It's another thing to consider. So again, guys, those are just some of the examples I could think about when you're weighing the options of how much or how little you should put into each side of the bucket. And again, your decision does not have to be black or white. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any variety of darker or lighter shades of gray. Okay, so that 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, you can do that. But the last thing I want to mention is I talked about in a previous class, let me go to the slide, that the money you put in, this is from the first video, the money you put into the TSP, you can decide how much or how little goes into the Roth or the traditional side of the bucket. But there's only one transaction you have no decision on, and that's the match money, the 5%. Your match money, unfortunately, you have no say in it. Match money always gets dumped into the traditional side of the bucket. Okay? Now, at this time, again, December 2022, there is legislation. It passed the House and it's now with the Senate to allow for us to decide which side of the bucket that match money goes into. But as of right now, that bill has not passed into law. Okay? So I'm hoping that it does. It's on the horizon, right? Another thing I want to mention is when you are putting money into the TSP, right? The money that's flowing into the TSP, there's two major transactions that you have to consider, right? And it's what I like to call old money and new money. When you go into the TSP, you can manage your old money. Old money is the money already in your account. It's money you've dumped into the account from your paycheck or maybe rolled in from another 401k. That money, once it's in one side of the bucket or the other, once it's in that bucket, you cannot move it from one to the other. So if I already have, let's say I have 10,000 in traditional, 10,000 in the Roth, I cannot take any of that money and dump it into one side or the other. It has to stay put, okay? You can do that once you roll it out into a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. You could do it then, but for those of us that are continuing to work and adding and are not eligible yet to take that money out yet, you cannot move it. What you can do is the other side, which is the money coming in. That's the other flow of money. I call it future money. The money flowing in. You can make a decision and change, like faucets rolling it, like two faucets, right? How much money in this faucet flows into Roth? How much from this money flows into traditional? You can adjust that, right? Very frequently, when I work with people, let's say they attend the class and they say, "Hey, Greg, I've been dumping everything in the traditional side of the TSP. Why? Because when I started, Greg, there was no Roth option. So I just kind of set it, forget it, and now everything's in the traditional. But I see your point. I think I want to put a little bit in the Roth." So one of the things they can do is maybe start cracking that faucet on to start having some money flow into the Roth, right? That's something you can do. Or if you want to aggressively catch up one side of the bucket with the other, right? And in this example, let's say this person has 100,000 in traditional, right? And only has 0 in the Roth. And if their goal before they retire is say, "Hey, I want to have 100,000 in traditional, but I want to have 30,000 in the Roth." So I might say, "Hey, okay, the money's in there is there. We can't move it. How about we shut off the faucet completely flowing into the traditional and completely turn on everything into the Roth so we fill up the Roth side of the bucket faster," right? Because even though that faucet is on with the Roth, there's one small flow of money still going into traditional. It's the match money. We have no control over that. So even though the faucet is completely turned on for Roth and we have shut our own faucet off on traditional. The match money still go in traditional, but will quickly fill up the Roth, right? So those are just some techniques that you can use. You can, again, do that analogy of the faucet, shut on, off, slow down here, there. You can do that and make your decision as far as maybe where you want to end up. Those changes you'll make on the MyPay website. You can do it by dollar amounts, you can do it in percentages there, but just so you know, the money flowing in, and whether it's Roth or traditional side of the bucket, those are still changes that are made on the MyPay website. Okay, so guys, that is a ton of information on taxes. I hope I didn't cause more confusion. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, but please, if you do have any questions, or maybe you need me, want to run your situation by me, just reach out to me. My email address is gregory.mesa2@va.gov. Just search for me online. Send me a message. We can set up a call. I could maybe answer your questions. There is a whole lot more to this. This is just a basic overview to consider. And by all, remember, guys, I am not your financial advisor. I am not your certified public accountant. Please, if you have questions or concerns, talk to those folks or run your ideas by them to get their opinion on those things. So that way, you're working as a team with them. Okay? With that said, guys, that's all for today.